Chapter 24. Subject, Rear Admiral Thomas Hahn. Ship, USSS Doom. Location, Saul. Fire, I ordered. Firing aye. Thanks to our early warning system, we'd been anticipating this attack from the Omni Union. The giant glob flying through warp in our direction had been bigger than any of their previous attacks, but all of their attacks had been bigger than the ones previous. I had worried that they may send a mobile prime platform after Saul, but I was wrong. They'd sent 5. The MPPs exited warp near Jupiter, and we fired at the same moment that the USSS Margraven did. We managed to kill 2 of them before they were able to get firing solution on us. It struck me how much effort it is going to take to clean these things up. I hope that their gravity doesn't fuck the system up too bad. Recharging, sir, Commander Ernest reported. Fire when ready. Evasive maneuvers, Nguyen. Aye, aye, sir, Nguyen said. The majority of our support fleet was fighting the ships the MPPs had brought with them. The remaining 3 mobile prime platforms turned their attention toward us. Nguyen faced our bow toward them and began using our thrusters to dodge volleys as best he could. For every shot that their powerful Macs managed to strike us with, 10 missed. Time's ticking. Captain, reach out to our support and have them start targeting Macs on this MPP, I said, highlighting the 3rd surviving MPP. Aye, aye, Gibbons shouted as he set about the task. Even if we survive to fire another shot, that 3rd MPP is going to be a problem. The age-old conundrum of 2 guns, 3 targets. In times past, one would simply try to line the targets up and fire through the first into the second. But that won't work here. The A1 needs to detonate within the MPP to destroy it. A through-and-through likely wouldn't do enough damage. As such, it behooves us to limit the amount of damage that the MPP can do, and the best way to do this is by taking out as many of its weapons as possible. Unfortunately, the weapons in question are Macs that can destroy most of our ships in a single shot, so the ships we send on this mission have a high chance of not coming back. Sir, the support fleet is only able to send a handful to the MPP, Captain Gibbons said. What? I asked incredulously. Why? The Omni Union ships in system are making a run for Earth and the colonies, sir, John said as his avatar appeared next to my seat. They're also using more advanced tactics than they previously were, and have accounted for our in-system warping capabilities with broad firing lanes and covering fire. They outnumber us and are watching each other's backs, so there aren't many of our ships that aren't being swarmed right now. How many are being sent? I asked, almost not wanting to know. 20, the AI replied. 20 ships versus more than 600 cannons. I tried to remain stoic as I watched our shields dwindle. We would be able to take out 2 of the remaining MPPs, but the 3rd may spell our doom. I chuckled darkly at the irony of being doomed on the USSS Doom. Then I had a moment of clarity, and I realized how we could stack our odds a bit. Ernest, give Nguyen the info he needs to give our Macs a firing solution on this MPP's cannons, I ordered. The more of its Macs we take out, the better our odds of survival. Aye, sir, he shouted. I looked back at our TAC map. The 20 ships that Second Fleet had managed to send were doing their best. I watched our guns change targets and send a volley as well. 20 seconds. We need to do as much damage as we can. John, what do you suppose the odds are that we pull this off? I asked quietly. Doesn't matter. We will pull this off because that's what we were ordered to do, sir, the AI replied. John had taken over for Omega aboard the ship when we were assigned to the defense of Saul. In many ways, it was a welcome change of pace. While I enjoyed Omega's humor, I never could tell if it outranked me or not, and that made things awkward. I definitely outranked John, though. The downside of John is that it is far too military-minded and seemingly has no sense of humor. Or maybe its humor is so damn dry that you can't tell if it's joking or not. Hell, that last line was something a caricature of a war hero would say. If John hadn't been so deadpan when it said that, I would have actually laughed. My thoughts on John's sense of humor, or lack thereof, almost served to distract me from our diminishing shields. Down to 25%. My hand cramped, and I realized I had been white-knuckling my armrest. I eased my grip and continued studying the TAC map. I almost winced as 2 of the 20 ships disappeared from the TAC map. I opened the casualty notifications and saw it was the USSS Macedonia and the USSS Yurgif who had been taken out. battleships, which have a much harder time evading than the smaller ships in the fleet. "Firing Ultramac!" Ernest shouted. My heart leapt as the round sailed through the vastness of space and impacted the intended target. "Good hit, recharge and fire at will. One more shot," I said. The USSS Margraven joined us and the 18 other ships to begin taking out the Macs on the one remaining Mobile Prime platform. We just had to hold out for 1 minute. If the MPP couldn't kill us both in the next minute, it would be destroyed. It was dividing its focus between us and the smaller ships, firing as fast as it could. "Keep up our evasion as best you can, Nguyen," I said. "Aye, sir." Nguyen was doing a damn good job. I used to pilot a beast like this, so I know full well how impossible of a task it is to get it to move evasively. Commander Nguyen seems to be blissfully unaware of this impossibility because he's managing it so well that it's making me doubt my own piloting abilities. The question is whether or not it will be enough. 2 more ships disappeared off of the TAC map. The USSS Harmony, a frigate, and the USSS Sivernal, a destroyer. If we make it through this, I'm going to personally recommend medals for each of the crew aboard these ships. It will take quite a while to submit the paperwork for 20 crews, but I'll use my vacation to make it so. My wife will forgive me. As the seconds ticked by, our shields continued to drop, and more of our ships were destroyed. The USSS Revenger was next, followed rapidly by the USSS Macbeth, the USSS Bulyavros, and the USSS Long March. The USSS Red Dragon, the USSS Onami, the USS Glaive, and the USS Neptune met a similar fate soon after. The remaining 8 ships were all destroyers. "Looks like we're having an effect," Gibbons said calmly. I gave him a look of confusion and then checked our shields. We were down to 8%, but the rate of decline had slowed significantly. 8%, 30 seconds, and 4 support ships remaining. The USSS Havrathon, the USSS Eradicator, the USS Yis-3, and the USSS Alpha Centauri had been destroyed. The remaining 4 ships were the USSS Tunchu, the USSS Solar Winds, the USSS War Spirit, and the USSS Liberty. The Liberty was the only one of the 4 that wasn't warping. It had opted for a mobile orbital bombardment tactic that seemed to be working quite well. It was flying just above the MPP's gravitational point of no return and blasting its max as it went. This confused me for a moment because it meant its deck max weren't in use, but then I noticed that the icon was shifting in an odd way. I highlighted the icon and realized that the ship was spinning, making use of all of its max and sustaining a continuous rate of fire. I tried not to wince. The forces involved in that maneuver were going to play hell on the Liberty's systems. If they survive, the Liberty's engineers are going to one hell of a time repairing it. Might end up being the first time in history that engineering stages a mutiny. 10 seconds, John began counting down as our shields finally gave up the ghost. 9, 8, 7, it said as a Mac round tore through our hull, missing anything vital. "Sealing bulkheads," Gibbons shouted. 4, 3, 2. Another round tore through us, disabling one of our aft engines. 1, charged. "Firing!" Ernest shouted. We fired, and I watched our projectile make its way toward the MPP. I checked on the Margraven and realized its Ultramac had been hit. Our shot was our only hope. We all held our breath as more Mac rounds pounded into our hull. "Successful hit," John informed us. "Take us out of its range, Nguyen," I ordered. "Aye, aye, sir." We hadn't taken critical damage yet, and we weren't about to let the bastard take us down with it. Nguyen expertly fired our thrusters to turn us about and to get us started in the direction we needed to go, turning tail and running from the Mac rounds chasing us. I watched our 4 remaining support ships disappear from the TAC map and breathed a sigh of relief when I realized they had warped. We managed to avoid further damage as the A1 spread and finally detonated, contributing to one hell of an asteroid field. Cheers rang out from myself and the crew. We survived. I leaned back in my chair and breathed normally for the first time since the battle had started. The USSS Solar Winds, the USSS Tunchu, the USSS War Spirit, and the USSS Liberty had survived along with us. "Get me a damage report," I ordered, once the shouts had died down. The TAC map displayed the asteroids that had been our enemies just moments prior. It would take weeks to clean it all up. Actually, a good chunk of the debris is probably going to be gobbled up by Jupiter if nobody intervenes. I wondered what almost 5 planets' worth of mass would do to Jupiter, but an incoming priority one distracted me. I opened it immediately. Recipients. Fleet 2 commanders. Earth and the other Saul colonies have been invaded by the Omni-Union. OU presence consists of infantry, artillery, armor, and close air support. Deploy warp prevention mechanisms, destroy hostile fleet presence, and begin landing your counter-invasion forces. Orbital bombardment is prohibited. Let our shields recharge and then get us in a good position to fire on the OU ships, I ordered. The only Marines the Gungnir-class dreadnoughts had were for policing, so we wouldn't be taking part in the counter-invasion. We could definitely help clean up the Omni-Union ships, though. I chuckled to myself before a thought occurred to me. Why didn't anyone tell me we had warp prevention? Chapter 25. Subject, Staff Sergeant Power. Ship, NA, location, Saul. Why weren't we using warp prevention to begin with? I demanded. Because you organics have a terrible habit of making your toys so damned grandiose that it makes it impossible to effectively run things without consuming vast amounts of resources, Omega replied. Sending a jamming signal into warp is energy-intensive, and we had no way of knowing when the Omni-Union would attack. It costs far less reactor fuel to keep max charge than it does to keep the warp disruptors running. Omega's right, Director 4 added. We believed it to be likely that the OU may attack Saul, but it was far more energy efficient to counterattack than it would have been to try to prevent the attack. We also aren't certain that the warp disruptors will work on mobile prime platforms. Why not? I asked. They're big enough that they might be able to simply shrug off the damage that warp disruptors cause to mass, trying to re-enter real space. It would have been a massive waste of fuel to have the warp disruptors running and have them be ineffective. Yeah? Well, we ain't so much worried about the MPPs right now, are we? Jason asked as he walked up. The man with the bullhorn and old-fashioned camo outfit turned out to be named Jason Jones. When the OU started touching down, we'd quickly diffused our disagreements and joined forces. Things were still somewhat tense because of the bodies we'd dropped, but it is what it is. Jason's ultimate goal is to get his people evacuated, and Omega was quick to promise an evac in exchange for keeping the director safe during this invasion. I suppose not, Director 4 said hesitantly. How's the prep going? I asked. The bunker was professionally made and had a reinforced tunnel for its entrance. It was fully stocked for a staff of over 100 people for more than 2 months, so we wouldn't have to be worrying about food or water. I wondered why a city hall would be at this level of preparation, and Omega had glibly reminded me. I had forgotten most of the Earth history I'd learned in high school, but after Omega's brief refresher course, I feel like the city of Adelaide may be under-prepped. We've got a squad supporting the APC out front and clear firing lines in the tunnel. There's heaps of ammo, and we've passed out all we can carry and stored the rest in the bunker. Your man Johnson did a tally of the supplies and says things are good, Jason said. No coldies, but we've got water and brekkie. That'll have to do. What kind of anti-armor did you bring? None. Weren't expecting cans like yours. Figured you'd be landing at the spaceport and driving up, so we brought shredder strips. But you fully surprised us with your sudden appearance. Shredder strips are used to destroy the tires of most vehicles. Sharp steel barbs arranged in such a way to grab and tear when you drive over them. Absolutely devastating to inflatables, but also useful against airless tires. Probably not as useful against tank tread, though. How far away is the base that you got your gear from? Jason laughed at the question. 6 or 7 hours, mate. It's between us and the Melbourne exclusion zone, but closer to the exclusion zone. Damn, I swore, then switched off my speakers. Omega? If we use the shuttle, how long would it take? If he's talking about Ballarat Barracks, about an hour-and-a-half round trip, Omega said. An hour and a half? I asked incredulously. It would have to be a low-altitude flight, which will limit how fast we can go. Any ships that go too high are going to get shot out of the sky. Nothing can be allowed to leave the system while the OU are here. I looked at Jason and was thankful that he couldn't hear Omega. As an undock, he's already pretty disillusioned with the United Systems. Pointing out the fact that the U.S. is willing to kill fleeing civilians would just add fuel to that fire. Probably wouldn't even matter that one ship of fleeing civilians could doom an entire system. Sergeant Smith, I said over comms. Yes, staffs aren't. Grab Corporal Simmons and take the shuttle to Ballarat Barracks. Omega will guide you there and back. I need you two to grab any and all infantry portable anti-armor you can find and get back here on the double. I'm giving you 30 minutes on the ground. Once the 30 are up, you need to be heading back here. Roger that. Moving out. Smith and Simmons should be able to get plenty of anti-armor ordnance in 30 minutes, assuming there's any left. 45 minutes to get there, 30 minutes for shopping, 45 minutes to get back. 2 of my Guardian suits gone for 2 hours. That's probably going to sting, but I've done more with less. I turned back to Jason, and he raised an eyebrow at me. It took me a moment to realize that he hadn't heard anything I'd been saying because of the soundproofing of the R9. He had just seen me standing here looking like I'm talking to someone. I fought the urge to chuckle at that mental image. I'm sending 2 of mine to do some shopping, I explained. It's Ballarat Barracks that they need to go to, right? Yep, he replied. Want some of mine to go with? No need. With these suits, my men can outpace and outlift yours by a very wide margin, I said. My men got Guardian suits too, mate. Not like these ones, and none of you are Gen-Alts, I shook my head. There's also the matter of trust. I don't know you or your men, and the only things keeping us from each other's throats is the threat of the OU and Omega's bargain. You'll forgive me for doubting that you and your men completely trust Omega's word. Jason laughed. Fair enough. You think the bot's telling the truth? It can get us out of here? I've got no reason to doubt it, I diplomatically replied. What if it's overruled by an admiral or something, though? I'd like to see them try, Omega's distinctive voice said through my suit's speakers. They will be an ensign again before they finish giving the order. Your people will be evacuated once the OU threat has been eliminated. How long's that gonna be, you figure? Jason asked, unsurprised by Omega's sudden interruption. If all goes well, a couple of weeks. In a worst-case scenario, a couple of months. There's also the possibility that the OU capture the system, in which case we'll have a whole other set of problems. Omega's brutally honest take on our situation left Jacob and I stunned for a moment. It made me wonder how things are going in space. If the OU managed to take Saul, how long will it take to get it back from them? Months? Years? There's also the political situation to think of. Humanity will push hard to take Saul back, but we'd only get a couple of chances before the pushback from the other species became too strong. One of the first arguments they'll make is that we're wasting resources on recapturing a mostly evacuated system that we already were wasting resources guarding. This argument will become much more potent with each failure to recapture the system. They will accuse us of using the U.S. military as a tool for our own personal vendettas, conveniently sidestepping the fact that Saul is a part of the United Systems and the only one being threatened by the Omni-Union. Omega's not wrong. If we fail to keep Saul, we will have to be worrying about food, water, and ammo. We won't be able to just hole up in this bunker. We'll have to venture forth. Doing so now would be foolish because we don't yet know where the OU is dug in. We'll need to give them a week or so, then scout out their locations and patrols. I looked at Jason and realized he was staring at me. His expression told me he had similar worries. We'll be fine, I said with fabricated confidence. We've got the best ships in the galaxy. Even if we lose Saul, we'll retake it damn quick. He smiled and shook his head. The reason I'm undocumented is because my parents and their parents wanted to avoid being drafted. Every undoc in here has a similar tale. Just peaceful people wanting to live peaceful lives, and this is where we end up. The universe has a twisted sense of humor, mate. Drafted? I asked. The United Systems doesn't have a draft. Earth does. Mandatory military service for every Earth citizen, with the option to transfer that service to the U.S., he explained. Hasn't the Earth planetary government prohibited declarations of war? Sure, but how do you think they enforce that? The EPG is the one that runs the draft. If a nation gets uppity, they send soldiers to enforce the peace. Peace enforcement, as you would bloody know, is done through battle, he sighed. Not many nations are a fan of the EPG's peace either. We've been waiting for World War V to kick off any year now. This was news to me, but I found myself unsurprised. Earth had always presented itself to the galactic community as a near paradise, but in almost the exact way that shady vacation resorts do. The same kind of resort where you're slightly more likely to get mugged than you are to have any sort of fun. Part of me had hoped it was coincidence. A quote came to mind. "I do not know with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." I think it was Albert Einstein who said that, shortly after Earth's Second World War. When we were learning Earth history in high school, my friends and I made fun of that quote, called it optimistic, turned it into an inside joke, and chuckled to ourselves when we learned about the destruction that happened during Earth's Fourth World War. Major cities turning into craters, coastlines getting new gulfs, the fall of the American Empire, and nearly 1 billion deaths were all sources of amusement to us. "Look what you can do with some sticks and stones," we had said. Of course, we were bored and angsty teenagers who were far separated from the violence being explained to us by our teachers by both time and distance. Still, I couldn't help but feel a stab of shame. "Anyway, what should we be doing?" Jacob asked. "We will need intel on enemy movements," I answered. "You and your men know the area well. Find out who's willing to do some scouting and get them prepped. We'll need them on the road in a day or two once the OU settles in. We want to know where the Omni Union are and what moves they're making. Be sure to tell the scouts not to get close. Their lives are more valuable than the intel." "That's a switch." "Not really. We're low on body count and we're likely going to be assaulted at some point. We'll feel every death, so we need to make those deaths count." Jacob stared at me for a moment, then nodded and walked away. As he was going, 2 of the team indicator lights in my helmet disappeared, indicating that Smith and Simmons were outside of standard comms range. Their mission might end up being a waste of time, but it would be really damn dumb not to at least try to prepare for enemy armor. "Contact," Hansen said over comms, "receiving fire. Get everyone in position if they aren't already and return fire," I ordered as I hefted my rifle. Another day, another firefight.